I know everybody was expecting a toddler to be up here. I mean, 2 decades in waste, clearly, but it's all right. No. So I'm going to actually grab a mic because I'm not very good. I get a bit active and I'm not very good at sticking in front of this one. Lovely, thank you. So I'm going to go reasonably rapidly through the slides because I think that there's a basic and a very intermediate understanding of waste and landfills and what happens in landfills, etc. And I've got a little bit of a surprise at the end of my presentation. So first of all, the title of my presentation is an awfully big mouthful. And the key message that I want to get across today is that there is untapped opportunity in the landfill landscape in Australia to achieve greater greenhouse gas reduction and benefit for our communities. So as we all know, we've got probably around 2,000 known or registered landfills in Australia. Most of our waste goes to a handful of those sites in metropolitan areas, but the majority of those landfills are in regional Australia, operated and owned by local governments, and many, many of those sites do not have landfill gas recovery. They don't have active gas extraction systems. And there's good reason, because our local governments, particularly in regional areas, are often under-resourced, right? We struggle to have the resources to not just to procure the system, but to install it, operate it, etc. But also because the regulatory environment in Australia generally doesn't say you've got to do active gas extraction on your landfill. So if you're going to your community and saying, oh, we're going to have a rate increase because we're going to put in this gas extraction system that nobody's telling us we have to have, okay, it's the right thing to do, but it's going to increase your rates by, umpteen amount of dollars, who's going to support that? Eventually, our regulatory environment has to catch up, because if we are putting municipal, putrescible, biodegradable, waste into a landfill, we should be capturing the gas, because the gas is going to be inevitable. 50% CO2, roughly 50% methane, global warming potential, human health and ecological risks, it's got to be done. But we are not there yet. So in the absence of that driver, that regulatory driver, there is an opportunity right now to use the government's, the federal government's ACCUs scheme, or it used to be called the ERF, Emissions Reduction Fund. It's now called the ACCUs scheme, and to actually get these projects funded through the generation of carbon credits. And that is the point of this talk. But there's more. I just want to explain that LGI, we are one of the smaller landfill gas recovery specialist companies in Australia, but we're not pro-landfill. So we would love it if tomorrow every landfill in Australia closed because we had the whole diversion, the whole circular economy worked out. And that, as a team of professionals, would be our ideal. But we would have a legacy issue. So, for example, we currently operate on 29 landfills in Australia. 5 of those are closed. And one of those we have been generating energy from. So we have 8 landfill gas to power stations that we own and operate. And one of those power stations has been operating on a site that closed over 20 years ago. And we've been generating power, initially 1 megawatt of power, since 2012. So you close those landfills tomorrow, and whether you're generating power or you're simply dealing with the methane, you have got gas coming out from this legacy issue. So I do not see that landfill gas recovery and projects are in any way counter to all the essential FOGO, recycling, circular economy initiatives that we have to be pursuing. But managing landfill gas is part of the solution. given the global warming potential of methane, which is huge, and it's getting scientifically considered huger, more huge, anyway, that we need to do something about it. And this is a low-hanging fruit. This is a little apple that we can all grab, potentially. Now, so we're going to go through, and you'll notice that LGI, we have several large projects on large metropolitan landfills, but the majority of our sites, as you can see, on the eastern-born of Australia, are regional. So we work largely in the regions with smaller sites. So, just briefly, how would a project create carbon credits? So when you are considering, say for your landfill, you want to put in a project, one of the most important things is that project is not going to occur without the incentive of carbon credits. So you need to get a project registered before you actually engage somebody to do the work. Before you make that financial decision to go ahead with it, you need to have a project registered under the government's ACCU scheme. And when gas is recovered, when you suck the gas out and you treat it and you run it through a flare and you combust it, because the methane is converted to... Costa, I think Costa is calling. I'm here, Costa, it's okay. No. So when you, because the methane is converted to less harmful carbon dioxide and water when you combust it, right? You have got an abatement of a greenhouse gas and you get carbon credits. So it's a little bit more complex than that. And obviously if there's enough gas and you can work through the crazy interconnection piece, which is very expensive and a logistical nightmare at the moment, then maybe you can put on a power station and that would be fantastic. I'm not going to talk to RNG, Chris, you and I can have a chat about that later, but it's an interesting one as well. So now we get to the interesting part. In Australia, since the Carbon Farming Initiative, the CFI Act was introduced in 2012, 2013, there is the concept that every landfill in Australia ought to be doing something, ought to have some level of gas capture. And so the first 30% of anything you do is considered the default baseline. So when you capture all this gas, you would get carbon credits for 70% of everything that you're capturing. Now, this landfill gas methodology has been going under a government review since, if people are aware of the Chubb review, where the government engaged Professor Ian Chubb to review, because there was a concern that there was a lack of integrity in some aspects of the ACCU scheme of the ERF, and landfill gas methodology came under scrutiny. And so, unfortunately, these things take time. So we've been working on this new method for about 14 months. It's a fast process, as you can see. But at the moment, we have a landfill gas methodology, and we are anticipating a new landfill gas methodology. It is complex. The calculations, I won't say loopholes, how do you say, like the curvy bits around this, how you apply it to a site, what gives you credibility, what allows you to be eligible, it is complex. But if anybody has questions about projects or wishes to discuss further, please come and see me. Unfortunately and sadly, I've been living this for about 12 years of my life. So there we go, for my sins. The wonderful thing about landfill gas credits, though, is that once that methane goes through your flow meter into your flare or your engine and it's combusted, it's a permanent destruction of the methane. It doesn't come back. It's not going to reappear. And so it is the most fabulously instantaneous, verifiable, high-integrity credit that you can generate under our current system. So I would encourage all landfills to consider whether or not they should go for this. I'm going to give you some case studies, because something that we have found is that a lot of local governments think that their site is too small, too regional, isn't eligible, would never be eligible to consider getting a landfill gas system. Not every site will be. There are some sites which are simply not commercially viable for a company like ours to come out and assist. However, it is worth investigating because so many are, and we are in conversations with a great number of councils. I'm going to go through 4 examples, and then I'm going to do a very quick little exercise with some of the people in the room. So first of all, with Gympie Regional Council, when we started at Gympie Regional Council, and I'm just going to give you the tonnages that they currently accept. I think it's about 45,000 tons per annum that they receive. Yep, thank you, Christine. So again, understanding, but when we started to work with them in 2016, that tonnage was much less. And it was a very marginal site. The flow rates were very, very low. I've only gone back to 2018, but you can understand that the flow rates were really low. Look at where we're heading to now. With the increase, the continuous investment in gas, and I've given you a sort of a warts and all view. When you put in a landfill gas system, it is not a set and forget. You have to continuously invest in that system. And once again, if you've got some revenue or you have an incentivized landfill gas supplier who's getting carbon credits, there is incentive to continuously invest in that system to continuously capture the gas and chase the gas on the site. Give Gympie another 5 years, you might even be looking at a power station. You might have sufficient gas flow for a power station. But once again, in 2016, tiny regional site that may have been overlooked if we hadn't completely nagged them to death and said, please, please, please consider going out for tender. And once again, none of these landfills have a landfill license requirement to capture gas or do anything with it. The license does not require this. So these councils have gone above and beyond any EPA or license requirement. The second example is Hawkesbury. We've been working with Hawkesbury. We had an original contract, and the contract was a little bit frustrated by some procurement issues, by some constraints we had, and the project lapsed after 7 years. We were able to work with council to get back on site. Through COVID, you can see COVID had an impact on our ability to access the site. Gas volumes dropped. We renegotiated a contract, and you can see where the gas volumes are going. So that continuous communication and an alliance type agreement with a contractor, very, very critical to continuing to chase gas and to consider options. There are so many options for regional. I'm going to skip over this one because I'm missing Clarence Valley Council from the audience. Shoalhaven. We took over this project. It was an upgrade project. In other words, the gas system already existed, but it had been somewhat neglected by the original gas supplier. The contract lapsed, and we were able to take the contract on. This site is tagged for a power station, and you can see, this is gas flow. You can see the sort of flows that we have achieved on the site. And I'm going to keep going quickly because I'll get to where we're going. 5 minutes, yeah. And finally, Tari. We have not installed the system yet, but I have included Tari because the Mid-Coast Council started the tender process about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now. When considering these projects, the procurement processes are onerous. We are seeing 2 to 3 years to obtain gas systems. We need to act quickly because the appetite for offsets, for carbon credits, et cetera, the policy environment is changing. And I believe that this window of opportunity will be closing or becoming less interesting in future. But I want to now do a little something. I have a representative from each of the councils, except from Clarence, unfortunately, and I have a question because I want you to hear from the people who have installed these systems and from the councils themselves. So my first question is to Christine Blanchard from Gympie Regional Council. Council went out to the market in 2016 with a request for tender and had a contract fully executed within 6 months. How and why did Council act so quickly?
Thanks, Jessica. I actually don't have a 100% answer to that because it was my predecessor who actually did it. But it's my understanding that he actually had a huge desire to have it in and he just basically rammed it through. My experience in another council where we have actually got signed documents before I left, but it's still not installed, was procurement. Procurement don't necessarily understand how to sell something, they only understand how to buy it. And the legislation is not geared up easily for this. I think if the answer is if you want to make it happen, you can, but you can also get tied up in huge knots with your procurement people. But persist. I got it through at Lockyer Valley and they're still not installed, but the paperwork's signed.
Thank you, Christine. The next question is, and that is absolutely something, having people behind the project, having a champion is critical. So a quick one for Hawkesbury. Have we got Samuel? There he is, sorry. One more. Could I ask, over the 10 years that Council has had LGI operating the landfill gas system on your landfill, what has been a key challenge and a key benefit for Council?
Thank you. I think for us, the fact that we have landfill gas capture is quite critical. We've had multiple notices with the EPA around our landfill gas migrating from site. So having a contractor on site that can help us address those key issues. So we've had greater than 1% landfill gas migration. So that's actually helped us reduce that. And particularly having a proactive one that can actually work together to minimise that even further has been great. I'd actually probably go back to procurement's the key issue. In New South Wales, anything over the $250,000 either bought or sold has to go out to tender. Procurement have no idea. Waste, even in the waste space, we often don't have any idea about how we can procure this to go out to market and get a great result for us and our community, but then also making sure that it's incentivised for LGI or other contractors to come on site. And I think part of that's probably the key challenge. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll do one last one, is for Peter Windley. Yes, thank you. From Shoalhaven City Council. What one piece of advice would you give to a council when planning for a possible landfill gas to power project? Or, I had another question for you, but I cannot see it there.
Thanks, Jessica. One piece of advice I'd give would be, and touching back on Chris's presentation actually, is treat landfill gas as core infrastructure right from the start and get into your planning. Get it in, not a bolt-on afterwards. Well, it can be done. It's better to plan and get it right. We've coming from a very different place where we generated for almost 20 years. And Jessica touched on it before. We had contractual issues with the previous contractor and our gas when it was all over the place. LGI back on board, and now we're looking at doubling the generation, batteries and all sorts of good infrastructure. For those out there building landfill cells, install at early stage, install the infrastructure early, vertical wells, do it all, get it as soon as you can. And most important thing is partners. Look for really strong partnerships that can deliver with all those procurement issues that we just talked about. Good, strong partnerships will end up in the right place. And yeah, is that enough?
Thank you. And it's not a promotion of LGI, it's just trying to explain there are opportunities. Please reach out to the councils. And if you have a chance to talk about actually the tendering process to get a landfill gas system, please reach out to David Rees from Mid-Coast, right at the back there. I don't have time to ask you the question now, but please reach out to him about that timescale and challenges with the tendering process. Thank you very much.